I've worked in that building for a long time, 23 years in the building and 31 years in state government. And I care about that institution. I care about the house. I care about the people who work in the house, and they just want to be able to do their jobs. One of the inscriptions on the side of that building, when you pull up on the east gate, it says, "Be just and fear not." And that's an inscription that the builders of that building put on, inscribed there, along with a lot of other inscriptions that were, some are scripture and some are not. That one isn't. It's a Shakespearean quote. But I see that when I pull up to that building, "Be just and fear not." But we have a culture of fear now in that building with the staff that work there, and it's time for me to speak up and say something.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, you might think, or somebody might tell you, this is a political case. That is not true. Politics is not the motivating factor behind this. She is apolitical. She doesn't even vote. I'm not even sure if you guys were aware of that. She has never picked a side, one side or the other. This is not political. This is legal. This is about protections. This is about enforcing the laws of the state of Missouri to protect those people who are trying to provide this state good government.
Will you take questions?
Yes, we will take questions.
Did what or happened or did not happen in the Ethics Committee influence whether or not you would be here this morning?
I'll go ahead.
I would just say that the statements from the chair and even the vice chair of that committee speak for themselves. The work was obstructed. Potential witnesses were intimidated. They were fearful. And you've seen the report from the independent investigator who said it was difficult to complete the work to investigate that matter because of the level of fear and intimidation that witnesses expressed.
But if that panel had moved forward with a formal complaint and action against the speaker, would you not have filed your lawsuit?
It would have made an impact on what I have to say today.
Are you going to continue serving as clerk during this period?
It is my intention to, yes.
Will you be a candidate for clerk in the next General Assembly? Because that is an elected position of the House, obviously. You know that.
Of course. I feel at this point my intention is to serve out the remainder of my term. I took an oath to stay in that role for 2 years, and I intend to honor that commitment, and then it'll be time for me to step aside.
You kind of implied in the statement you released that it was your complaint that was the basis of the entire ethics investigation. I was wondering, can you confirm that, and then what else needs to be done to address the system that you say failed here?
So I initially brought forward an inquiry to the committee about a position I took about protecting an employee who I felt had been wrongfully terminated, and I took that. The rules of the U.S. House and the rules of the Missouri House provide a mechanism for me to receive an advisory opinion from the committee. So I took an initial complaint, or inquiry I would call that, to them. Now another member did ultimately file a complaint.
Dana, there's a specific line in the lawsuit when we're dealing with the fireside matter. In the conversation, I think it was between you and Kenny Ross and the speaker, where you said we need to bring John Patterson in on this. It doesn't ever say how that resolved. Did John Patterson ever push back on this contract as well?
John Patterson was not. John Patterson and I have had a number of conversations, and he was not pushing for this contract.
He's kind of poised to be the next speaker.
Yes.
Are you expecting him, or are you calling on him to implement any changes to how House policies are written in regards to investigating the House Speaker?
That's going to be up to the incoming speaker and the incoming leadership team. I certainly would support an examination of how to handle complaints of this nature when we're dealing with leadership, and as well as protecting. We need a whistleblower protection policy within our House handbook that we do not currently have.
Dana, you have been chief clerk under a number of House speakers. Dean Plucker is not the first. But can you explain the difference between being the House clerk under different speakers and then when it comes to Dean Plucker, because you said you were threatened. Can you just explain the differences over the years?
I've worked under 11 speakers, and 4 of whom I've worked, I would say, directly under or worked with, And the difference between this administration and others is that there's a level of respect. I felt respected up until this point. What I've learned with the speaker is I got along with the speaker until I told him no.
Had you ever worked with a speaker who called women invasive species or anything of that nature?
Never.
Can you say, after that comment, how would you describe in general the speaker's relationship with other women working in the House?
I can only speak for the experiences that I have, and those are outlined in the petition.
One thing about this is, had it been handled in the House, had they been able to police themselves, we would not have to go to the other branch of government, which is where we are. We are now going to the judicial branch to seek enforcement of the laws that they themselves passed and should have been following. When they chose not to do that, that forced her to bring this lawsuit to not only protect herself, but everybody else under her who works there, because they have to be confident when they come back to work that they will be protected and that they have mechanisms to which to voice those complaints to give good government to the state of Missouri.
Dana, I also want to ask, House Speaker Dean Blocker is technically done already, unless there's a special session. We do have veto session left. So what are you hoping to gain from this lawsuit? It from happening ever again in the House? Kind of talk about what the end goal is here.
What I would like to see happen is that I take an oath when I was sworn in as clerk, and I want to see our elected officials live up to the oath they take, to follow the law and to be respectful to the employees that work for them.
That oath was referenced in the lawsuit, specifically to keep the secrets of the House, a phrase which we've heard forever but is clearly not well defined. Does it need to be well defined?
Kermit, that is a phrase that I think traces back to probably the beginning of our, maybe even into the United States House, so it is a very archaic phrase. But when we talk about keeping the secrets of the House, what I would say, and I think what is iterated in that petition, is that it does not include violating the law or violating ethical standards.
Governor Parson recently said public officials, elected officials, don't get a free pass. Do you think that is relevant here as well?
Well, when it comes to following the law, I don't think elected officials, they create the laws, and they should be bound to follow the very laws they pass.
Did this lawsuit come to mind after the investigation, the ethics committee ended and nothing happened? Or were you thinking of this lawsuit during that ethics committee?
I felt the need to secure counsel because I felt alone, and I had colleagues that were being retaliated against and were feeling the same way. And so I sought counsel some time ago, but I put my faith in the ethics and the processes, and my statement, I stand behind my statement that I went to the chair of the committee, I reported what I knew to be wrongdoing, and I do think she acted in good faith. And I do think the committee did deliberate. Unfortunately, we didn't get the results. I think the committee was, in some ways, prevented from achieving the results that I hoped we would receive.
One more from me. That it's probably laid out in the complaint. I haven't gone all the way through it, but you mentioned retaliation. Can you kind of explain an example or two of like what form that took in the office?
What I would say to that is, if you read the petition, it's long, and there is a story there, a narrative those are facts, as Kevin has brought forward. I think that this petition speaks for itself.
Your attorneys have called this a whistleblower case. What, if any, retaliation against you are you expecting?
Well, that retaliation, I think, as you will read, is already taken place. And I'm not in a position to be able to help the employees that I feel diminished in my capacity, and I have been for months now because of actions that were taken by the leadership of the House.
What kind of environment did the speaker create when he hired a chief of staff with an abusive past? I mean, did that cause any fear among female employees?
I can't speak for all of the staff. I do know that there is a level of fear, and it's there.
Rod Jutton is described in the pleading as, when he coming on, as almost like his job is to be a peacemaker. So, Dean Blocker is seeing ghosts. When did that change, and what was the particular point that changed? You can tell us.
Rudy, I think you're correct that was my first impression, that he told me that he was coming on to calm things down, and that he thought he could calm things down between me and the speaker, and he made that statement repeatedly. However, when I took some steps to protect a particular employee who was in a very vulnerable position, that changed, and it changed overnight, and that was in December when that happened, November, December last year.
I believe you had a question, didn't you?
Yeah, you said some of your colleagues were feeling the same way. How widespread do you think is this issue of a lack of respect and kind of work? Is it a workplace culture issue?
I'm sure you're aware that our human resources officer had reached out to the ethics chair and outlined her concerns. And when the House HR officer can't do her job to protect staff, and nor can I, that's a problem.
One last
Do you
question.
expect additional defendants in this case, or plaintiffs in this case?
I can't speak to that.
Kevin, I want to find out, do you expect the speaker and his chief of staff to be represented by the Attorney General's office, or should they have private counsel in this case?
I think it would behoove them to have private counsel in this case. One thing about the law that they passed, now this law, the 105055, the Missouri whistleblower statute that protects government employees, it does not have an absolute mechanism to go after an individual. Now we think that individual liability does come within the statute, because it says in the venue portion that you can file in the place or location where the person against whom the complaint is filed. Now a person would be an individual. In this situation, we've talked about both Dean Plocker and Rod Jetton. Now, we filed the case in Cole County, but we believe that gives a mechanism for individual liability. Because when we're not talking about the Republican Party as a whole, the Democratic Party as a whole. We're talking about individuals who we believe have abused their authority and power. And in fact, there are many good Republicans who stood by her and attempted to do the right thing and sought a true end and a peace to this matter. But they were stymied by the process itself. And that's why we had to go to the other branch of government, into the judicial branch, to seek the relief really that can be given in this case.
Kevin, you know how fast things move or don't move in a building like this.
Yes.
The clock is ticking on this General Assembly. She's indicated she's going to be gone when the General Assembly is over. The word moot lingers in the shadows. Is there any expectation that if this thing goes beyond the end of this year into January of next year, that this case disappears because the players are no longer in the positions that they held?
This case will not disappear, and the reason this case will not disappear is because there's always going to be a chief clerk, there's always going to be a head of HR, there's always going to be people here who want to do the right thing. And you have got to stand up and establish the rule of law for those people. For the Rod Jettons of the future that mistakenly come here believing they can push people around. For the Dean Plockers who think they can come here and push people around, violate policies, violate the laws, violate the regulations, and step on the necks of the individuals who are here to do good governance for the people of Missouri. There are people that work in that state house government, the people that work in the House of Representatives of both parties. And they do not choose one side or the other. They are here to do the work they have been assigned, the work they're paid to do, to make sure the rules are followed and that their jobs are protected. We're here for those people and to protect them in the future.
Before I became an attorney, I had a career in human resources, and I am appalled by the level of policy violations and retaliation that is going on within the House. Things that would never be tolerated in a corporate environment have been allowed to run rampant here. There are politicians who believe that they're above the law and that they can't be held accountable for their actions. And I believe that the citizens of Missouri will be shocked and very disappointed when they learn the way that their leaders have been acting behind closed doors.
Where do you think that comes from, that attitude?
It comes directly from the leadership.
Is your name Holly? Are you Holly?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Thank you very much for being here today, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. We need a little bit more ambient.
I know.